The elders would always say, don't touch those sites, don't disturb them. So one of those evenings, my grandfather brought over these elders for eating after church and tea. My chance came and I brought it out. A couple of them were kind of no, and then I started explaining this is not for money making, it's for a future generation. And they all agreed, and yeah, we have to look at it that way. Because their mindset in the past is they're grave robbers. They're going to take all this stuff and sell it. And we said, it'll be here, it'll be ours. We all agreed we need to do this for the future generation. We want to get everything preserved so when we're all gone, they'll have that. And that's one thing I'm proud of in this work. I was a small part of getting this project going.
We showed up in the summer of 2009 and right away found a doll on the beach, a wooden doll that was painted with red ochre still. And we followed a trail of artifacts on the high tide line up the beach for about 1.5 miles until we saw a site eroding out with house posts and wooden vessels and so on. The site was eroding because permafrost that had held the soils together until then had melted. And once that permafrost has melted, the soils that are left behind, which are basically silts and from glacial outwash, have the consistency of bread flour, and they erode very rapidly. There's a root mass that's no more than 30 centimeters thick covering it up, and it's very easily undercut. And in one storm, they were losing as many as 10 meters overnight in a high tide with big waves. They weren't getting as much ice cover. And so the combined forces of global warming are destroying the archaeological and fossil record throughout coastal Alaska. And some parts of Alaska have lost more than 1 mile of shoreline. We're looking at hundreds of miles of coastline, probably thousands of archaeological sites. Every bit as rich, or probably richer than this one. I mean, the odds that we've got the very best site is very small, and they're calving off all the time. And so we have very few people trying to rescue what we can, and it's like going into a museum that's on fire and just taking out what we can carry in our arms.
So of course it's important to save all the artifacts, because otherwise they're just going to be, you know, in the Bering Sea somewhere with all the history and their spirits. You know, they're alive. We think of these objects as alive. Traditionally, we wouldn't have ever dug up anything that belonged to people who have passed, but because of climate change and our adaptation to it, part of that adaptation was elders agreeing to excavate for, the betterment of the community, it turned out to be.
So we're looking at the height of the Little Ice Age, when there was a lot of changes in the subsistence menu, a lot of pressures on exchange relationships between villages and traditional hunting territories, and warfare peaked during this time, and we think there's an association there. It seems counterintuitive, but in fact, in this site and others that were occupied during climate change, rapid climate change and towards colder temperatures, that the cultural response actually triggered a kind of a fluorescence in terms of a lot of innovation in hunting and fishing gear, a lot of ceremonialism to support hierarchies, and hierarchies that grew to kind of make decisions and to make sure things got done and so on. And so they were forced to adapt to deal with the Little Ice Age.
I don't think the melting permafrost can support our infrastructure anymore. It's normal to jack your house up every year because of permafrost shifting the ground. We see a difference in our resources, in our food security. Within the salmon especially, there's a big difference in the quality and quantity of the fish there's a big difference. Same with our caribou, they're gone now, we can't hunt them. The numbers have depleted so much that, you know, we haven't hunted them in, I think, 3 years now, and we miss that a lot. It used to once be our main food source besides salmon, so it was our main, you know, our main meat. As a kid also, we used to have underground storages for our dog team. So we'd put away a bunch of salmon at the end of the season before they're all gone, and store them underground, and all winter we'd just open up the cache, get some food for the dogs and feed them. And that was always like one of my favorite chores, but I don't know anyone who has an underground storage here anymore because it just wouldn't work anymore. The permafrost has melted so much that we can't have underground storage anymore. And I think that's why there's no dog teams anymore.
You know, one of the goals in this project was to see if there were things we could learn from the way people at Nunalleq adapted to climate change that could translate to today. And of course, you know, it's a period where it got colder instead of warmer, but we learned a little bit about what species are most sensitive to temperature changes. And we also saw the way people pulled together and shared information and managed to survive it. And I think that's we're seeing parallels today in the way people are pulling together and studying the problem. And our impression archaeologically is that people are under their best under this kind of pressure. When the chips are down, people figure out how to survive, and I think they're going to do it this time.
You know, of course, people struggle with adaptation and change, but in a way, it's like we have no choice but to adapt, and we can do it effectively or try to resist it. But with climate change, it's going to happen anyway. And a lot of that scares me, but at the same time, I'm happy that we are where we are. And my grandma would always say we're the richest people in the world for knowledge and our culture. And to be a young adult, it's hard to navigate different worlds that are exposed to you, and it could be intimidating and overwhelming. But yeah, part of the message is to just never forget who you are and where you came from.